Well, we've got Florence here with us, and the situation in Egypt is really dominating the international press, is it not?
Absolutely. Let's take a look at some front pages. For instance, the International Herald Tribune talks about these mass killings that are shaking up Egypt, and there's a photo there that was taken in front of a morgue in Cairo. The Independent also has this on their front page today, and it says that a nation's hopes for peace and democracy lie bleeding in the streets, and you see a photo that was actually taken inside, where was that? No, that was actually inside a hospital, yes, in Cairo.
And there have been conflicting reports, as we've been reporting, in fact, all morning about just what happened yesterday. And a lot of papers are focusing on the position of the army.
That's right. There's an interesting analysis piece in The Independent, actually, that points out that people in Egypt are actually unlikely to turn on the army despite this, quote, slaughter. Now, this article points out that the beloved army still holds a very exalted position in the minds of many Egyptians, despite a catalog of mishaps, mistakes, and abuses, according to this article. Now, despite all this, the army's reputation on the street level, well, has remained intact. It has this kind of exceptional status, and you really get that impression when you read another article, this time in the Washington Post, that was written by an Egyptian author named Ahmed Al-Aidi. Now, he writes this article where he's trying to understand exactly what's happening in Egypt today. It's actually quite a confused article. He can't really explain what's going on, but the one thing that's sure is that he says that he hopes that even as the violence escalates, the army will, quote, not let us down. So once again, this very important attachment to the army. The Guardian, in their editorial today, however, is quite critical of the army and says that, well, the army's claim to be the protector of all Egyptians is disintegrating before our eyes, because here's the army acting in a very biased way against the Muslim Brotherhood. And this article says, well, that the Muslim Brotherhood is actually not going to back down, and certainly not during the Ramadan. So the situation could get worse unless the army kind of cools its jets a little bit.
And talking about getting worse, a lot of papers are comparing the situation in Egypt to the Algerian war, the civil war in the 1990s.
That's right. There's an interesting piece in ASHARQ ALAWSAT, so a pan-Arab paper based in London, that wonders if we're seeing the Algerian nightmare in Egypt. And even if, of course, each country is very different and has its specific history, the conditions are very similar. Specifically, what's happening in Egypt today to what happened in Algeria in 1992 following the suspension of general elections. And this article points out that the Muslim Brotherhood is acting very much like the Islamic Salvation Front, basically doing everything it can to win elections, but not acting in a very democratic manner. And if we actually read an article in La Tribune, so an Algerian paper, it seems like it's talking from experience when it wonders if this situation in Egypt is getting out of hand. It calls on all Egyptians to listen to the voice of reason. Violence only brings more violence, says this article, and it says that this situation could get very chaotic if the country's not careful. Now, Gulf News, the paper based in the Emirates, also says that Egypt is on the verge of a very serious political confrontation, and once again calls on both sides to really try to find a political solution to calm down the violence. What Egypt needs is a pluralistic governing body.
And the Christian Science Monitor looks at how the international community is keeping a close eye on the situation.
That's right, specifically the U.S., because this article points out that, well, Egypt is Washington's most important Arab partner. Now, so far, Obama has said that, the U.S. is not aligned with any side, but this article points out what's happening in Washington, how there's pressure on Obama to actually start picking a side.
And moving on to another story, there's a lot of anger in the Canadian press over that tragic runaway train accident.
That's right. Let's take a look at the front page of La Presse, so a Canadian paper, with this one word, désolation, so grief and consternation. And they actually have an 11-page special today on that death train, as they call it. It says that Lac Megantic looks like a war zone. Le Journal de Montréal also talks about this, the same word, désolation, but also colère, anger, and this paper points out how the blame game has started beginning. A lot of people are just trying to figure out how this tragic accident could have happened.
Okay, thank you very much, Florence. That was the International Press Review. Well, coming up just after the break, all the latest news from Egypt, plus some French politics. Is Nicolas Sarkozy making a political comeback? And in sports, a €5.1 million move Spain striker David Villa will be leaving Barcelona for the Atletico Madrid.